Right, so I've made a bullet hell dialogue system, and I need something to demonstrate it, otherwise its creation is for naught and its usefulness questionable. Fortunately, I have recently developed a mild interest in narratives. Unfortunately, I have very little experience with creating them. The advice that's oft given in such a situation where you want to do something you have no experience with is to start simple, almost insultingly simple. It's good advice, gets you familiar with the process of making the thing so you have some practice when time comes to make something big, some knowledge of pitfalls you could fall into. What's more, simple works just fine here, as the point here is to make and test the dialogue system rather than the game. Thus, my simple practice narrative is this. You're thirsty and want some water. There's a water cooler from which you could acquisition some, but the cost is 100 million monies. That's a lot. Fortunately, a multi-billionaire is in the cave with you, and if your bullet dodging skills are top-notch, you can use this person as an overpowered ATM and get your delicious water. Except that once you do get the water, there is a terrible and existentially horrifying plot twist, which is too frightening for this margin to contain. Part of the simplification process was deciding not to make multiple endings. The dialogue system I know already has the ability to do multiple routes, but there's no real need to demonstrate to myself this functionality that I know exists, and actually creating those routes would involve adding more characters and locations, and I'm already regretting making these cool animated portraits and isometric tiles. I don't want to add more. Isometric tiles! They look super cool and rad, but they're hell to work with. At least they are if you're me, and you don't know what you're doing. They require a lot of planning and organization that I don't yet know how to do. Check it, one floor tile looks like this. Looks good. The quirk is that the tile doesn't extend all the way to the borders of the image. There's a 1 pixel gap, and that's there so that the tiles above and below that gap can meet. Except that when we extrude this upwards to make a wall, which needs to be done, there ends up being a gap in concave bends like that. Look at it, I had to make a whole other tile variant to fill that in. Also requiring a whole new variant is this, where a higher floor overlaps a lower wall. It's gross and foul, and perhaps I'll get used to it and have a different opinion after making more isometric tile sets in the future, or maybe I shall use actual 3D blocks instead to avoid this nonsense forevermore. A benefit to making the dialogue system alongside a simplistic and elementary game is that when something turns out to be necessary, I can simply add it. For instance, when you interact with the water cooler, you need a different result based on how much money you have. If you have the 100 million required, then you of course get the water, but if you don't, you get told off. I could have made a node to check against your current amount of money and see if it's enough, but a better, more general idea is to make a node to check against your current amount of anything. Again, I can do little other than praise Godot for the convenience with which I could make this drop-down menu. Holy shit, it's so easy. But also, I will curse Godot, because this whole node graph dealie is impossible to zoom out of more than a certain amount until a future Godot update. Damn you! A big part of the reason I make this dialogue system so general and relatively sophisticated, despite the absolutely juvenile and plebeian nature of the story, is because the point of this is not to make a compelling game, but a useful bullet hell dialogue system. So I can do something I've never done before, reuse this large system for more games in future. Not soon though. While this game, Aquasition, is complete and can be played, I will be continuing my enjoyable habit of moving on to something completely different. Bye! Whee!